So this episode is going to be all about dust on your sensor, dirt on your sensor. It's something I had to deal with recently, so figured right now is a perfect time to kind of go over it for everybody else out there. So I just got my sensor cleaned on my Sony a7R. Now I've had this camera for about 3 years now. I bought it when it was brand new, like first came out. And I am not kidding you when I tell you that this was probably the dirtiest sensor I've ever seen. I hadn't got it cleaned since the first day I got it, and I finally got it cleaned after I was starting to get annoyed with having to take out hundreds of pieces of dust on my photos all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Adobe Photoshop and show you guys the before and the after of having got this sensor cleaned at George's Camera here in San Diego. Okay, so this is the before image before I got my sensor cleaned. Now, it doesn't look like much. Obviously, I was just taking it against a pure white wall. But what I can do to kind of bring out the dust to you guys is up the contrast and up the clarity. And look at that. I mean, keep in mind, this is the actual sensor that I was taking all of my photos with. And it was no cleaner than this. It was always this dirty. Well, at least from my last trip, it got this dirty. And that is just absolutely disgusting. I mean, there's, I don't know, fibers on there, dark pieces of dust, and it's everywhere on the sensor. You know, it's even dead center. I mean, this is something that was obviously very, very annoying to me, and I finally decided to get it fixed. Now, I'm going to sync the settings so I'll have the contrast and clarity there, and this is what it looked like after. So look at the difference. It's almost hard to believe. So this was the before, and that's the after. Look at the difference between all of those dots. So one thing I do want to say is, like, this is worst case scenario. You know, I have it at f22. So if you don't already know this, dust on your sensor is highly exaggerated the further stop down your lenses. So at f22, the pieces of dust are incredibly noticeable. They're very defined versus maybe like f2.8. It's not nearly as noticeable because it's blurred out more. But you know, even at f22, this is manageable. You know, I can go in and use the spot removal tool and just kind of, you know, blotch a few of them out, no big deal. And one thing I do want to talk about, this is kind of a little tip for this episode, is this tool called Visualize Spots. So this is in the spot removal tool, and you can slide this and it'll kind of reveal more of these dots that are maybe not as noticeable in a normal situation. So you have it just like this, and I can take them out without even looking, blah, blah, blah. It'll just keep going. So this is kind of not a normal circumstance that you would be editing the photos, because obviously most of the time you aren't taking pictures of just a plain white wall. Because one thing you do have to worry about is, okay, so like let's say I click right here, and where you click, you're basically telling Photoshop that this is the area that I want to be corrected, and then you'll notice it creates a second dot right nearby. So what Photoshop is doing is it's grabbing an area nearby that it says looks like the area that you just clicked on, so it'll kind of blend it all together to remove the dust. Now, this will become an issue if you're working with a more complicated image than just a pure white wall, and I'll open up one right here for you guys. Okay, so here we have kind of like a real world example. Now, this is unedited, so you know what I'm going to do just to kind of amplify the issues is I'm just going to obviously pop up clarity and contrast again, and you can see some of the pieces of dust kind of appear there. So what I'm going to do is kind of zoom in on these areas. Now, right here is a perfect example. Can you see that little piece of dust in the water there? So I'm gonna bust out this spot removal tool and draw a little circle around it. And it does a pretty good job of removing it right there. But what you'll notice is it kind of popped in a little bit of the white water there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to this spot that I removed, and I'm just gonna make a slight adjustment here and bring it out of this little piece of white water, and you'll notice it'll update and it'll look good as new. So there you go. The reason you want to be careful about this is because if you're working in an area, okay, like over here, like let's say I want to remove this spot. And what if it decides that it looks good in an area where it might not completely blend? So what if, let's just drag this down a tiny bit to where it just clips the trees a little bit. This is really the only issue with this tool that you're going to be dealing with is just simply that. Now that's not a big deal. All you have to do is if it does something like that, just go back into the tool, grab it, and just shift it somewhere else. It's a very, very simple fix. And I mean, that's really all there is to the tool. So if you have dust on your sensor, it's not the end of the world. It's just going to be a little bit of a task to take it all out. So you saw how to deal with the dust on your sensor, but maybe you don't even know if you have dust on your sensor. Now it's a pretty easy way to figure it out. Obviously you saw what I did. Just point it at a blank wall, turn it to whatever your lens will stop down to. If it stops down to f22, turn it to f22 or f32, whatever it goes to. Just take a picture, a long exposure of the wall, and you'll be able to see all the dust that kind of appears on the image. Now, I wouldn't say if you see one single piece of dust, go out there and try to fix your camera. That's not really going to be worth it for you, but you know, you can be aware that the dust is there. Now, how can you avoid the dust? Now, dust is everywhere, and everybody's going to have pieces of dust on their sensor, but there are a few ways that you can avoid it. Now, what I do want to say is the Sony camera I have is very, very prone to getting dust on the sensor, and I'll tell you why. These cameras are mirrorless cameras, which means if I take this cap off right here, you will see directly into the sensor. And I don't want to take it off because I just got it cleaned, and I don't want it to get dirty again. But a normal camera, like a DSLR, has a mirror and a shutter in front of the sensor, kind of protecting it from dust, versus this one where the dust can just fall directly onto it. So these cameras aren't exactly the cleanest cameras in the world, and I probably should have got it cleaned a long time ago, but I didn't. So just keep in mind, if you have a mirrorless camera, that's going to be something that you have to be aware of, that these cameras are going to be more prone than a standard camera to getting dust. But if you do want to avoid getting dust on your sensor, this applies for both DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. Never change your lens when the camera is still on. Now the reason is that when the camera's on, you have like a little electrical current going through the sensor, and when the electrical current is there, it creates a little bit of static electricity, which actually draws the dust to the sensor like a magnet would. So especially a mirrorless camera, where it's got the electronic viewfinder on the back, that sensor is always on, always gathering information. So that's kind of like a twofold issue with these cameras versus a DSLR, where you have the sensor running almost at, you know, full blast all the time. So if you were to take the lens off, there's nothing protecting it, and the sensor is fully on, and the dust is going to get in there. Now, second thing, I would say this is going to be the most obvious, and it is simply do not change your lenses in a dirty environment. Now, the reason my sensor got so dirty was I made a trip up to Central California, and I went to Mammoth Mountain. Now, I didn't realize that Mammoth Mountain was made of pumice. I mean, it's nothing but like hardened volcanic ash everywhere. And I should have known, because when I was walking around, I could feel the dust like grit between my teeth. I should have known that would get on my sensor. So when I changed my lenses on the side of the road, a ton of dust ended up settling down on my sensor and made the rest of the time not necessarily like unenjoyable, but you know, it was definitely weighing on my mind that I had a lot more dust on my sensor when I left than when I got there. So that is one way to try to avoid getting dust. And another thing I also always do is when I'm actually changing my lenses, I never change the lenses with the camera sitting up like this, because obviously if I take this off, the dust is going to be more likely to settle down on the sensor like this rather than, you know, having the lens down here and screwing it in upside down. So I think that's one good way to kind of avoid getting the dust on there. And like I said, like if you do get dust on here, it's not the end of the world. You can remove it in Photoshop, and you can also remove it yourself. Now, there are ways to get the dust off the sensor, obviously, and there's two different ways. There's the self-cleaning kits where, you know, you can go ahead and clean all the dust off the sensor yourself. It's cheaper to do this than actually bringing it to somebody to get it cleaned. However, I would not recommend doing that, and I'll tell you why. Now, obviously it is cheaper, so that's kind of a nice benefit. However, if you mess it up and you scratch your sensor, you're basically not going to be using that camera very much anymore, especially if there's a scratch the whole way across the sensor, or even worse, if you're rubbing it and you have a ton of little micro scratches across the sensor, you're not going to be able to use that camera again. So I would recommend bringing it to a professional to get it done, because number one, they've cleaned hundreds and hundreds of sensors before, so they know how to do it. And number two, let's say worst case scenario, they end up absolutely destroying the sensor on your camera. I would be willing to bet that a lot of those camera companies or a lot of the camera repair companies have some sort of insurance policy for ruined camera gear that's their fault. So I would definitely say go with a professional, because if you do, you're gonna have a little bit more protection on your camera than if you go and try to do it and wreck something. Because I'll tell you what, seeing how dirty my sensor was and seeing how clean it was afterwards, I would never try to do that myself, and I would only really trust a professional doing it. So I covered everything from cleaning your dirty pictures like on Photoshop, how to avoid getting dust on your sensor, and if you do get dust on your sensor, what is the best route to actually getting it off. So I think I covered everything. If I didn't, leave me a comment below and I can answer whatever question you have. And also, if you have any other questions for future episodes, let me know. I've already done one viewer request for an edit on Photoshop. But if you have any other questions about photos, video, equipment, whatever, I can make a full video on whatever you're asking. And also, if you can, leave me a like and subscribe, because I come out with new content every week. So I do want to thank you guys for watching this entire video, and I will see you on the next one.